Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Explosive new allegations of Chinese interference, this time in Vancouver's municipal elections.
If there is proof of this, I'd be as mad as hell as everyone else. But right now, there are a bunch of insinuations, and it's actually quite hurtful.
Fiery reaction from City Hall and the former mayor also. A 5-year-old with autism overdoses on his prescription medication.
We felt right away something was wrong. It was more than just a deep sleep, and we tried to rouse him and we couldn't.
The pharmacy's mistake and his parents' search for accountability. And preparing reservoirs for the big one.
Building damage, some bridge damage, and even fires, that we know that the water utility needs to be prepared.
The push to protect our water supply from natural disasters.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Michelle Ghoussoub. Anita is away tonight. Beginning here in Vancouver, where the mayor is defending his election win in response to questions about potential foreign interference in last fall's vote. Those questions are the result of a story by the Globe and Mail based on a January 2022 CSIS report the Globe says it's seen. Our Eva Ghoussoub breaks down the accusations and the fallout.
So to say that any one person or group, swung an election, I think it's kind of crazy.
In October, Ken Sim was elected in a landslide, becoming Canada's first Chinese-Canadian mayor.
We absolutely worked our butts off. We worked for 4 years. We had 19 candidates. We knocked on, 74,438 doors.
Now, 4 months later, he's answering questions about it after a report in the Globe and Mail. It says it's seen a January 2022 CSIS report which found that China's former consul wanted to help pro-Beijing politicians get elected to Vancouver City Council. Sim defeated the incumbent Kennedy Stewart in the following election by nearly 37,000 votes.
Vancouver voters have a clear choice.
Stewart says CSIS briefed him last May about possible municipal interference.
The suggestion was they wanted somebody else's mayor, that they were deeply unhappy with my, I had cut off all communications with the consul general.
Today, Stewart was blunt.
So I don't think foreign interference caused my loss.
Critics of Beijing say it's not far-fetched the consul would have wanted to get rid of Stewart, who was pro-Taiwan.
So this kind of information definitely will affect a lot of Chinese descent voter, regardless where they're coming from.
Others say any evidence of interference should be made public.
Interfering with our elections is really, really an awful thing. And if it was really true, why haven't they charged somebody? Why haven't they expelled somebody?
As for Sim, he says he's being targeted because of his background.
If there is proof of this, I'd be as mad as hell as everyone else. But right now, there are a bunch of insinuations, and it's actually quite hurtful.
He says he hasn't had any conversations with the current Consul General of China in Vancouver. CBC News reached out to the consulate for comment, but did not get a response. Eva Ghoussoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Globe and Mail is reporting stirring strong reaction in municipal politics and among Chinese Canadians, with some raising concerns of a potential racist backlash. And among the many questions, who is to blame? Some are frustrated the CSIS report is now circulating widely without an action plan to address it.
I'm not taking a side here, but I'm saying that if you're going to level these allegations and make these comments that have gone so widespread across the country, at least do something about it. I would be very satisfied if they arrested somebody or they expelled somebody. Then we have some proof, because obviously they're doing something. I have enough faith in the integrity of our system that would say that if somebody did something wrong, they're going to be punished for it. Well, so far right now, they're just throwing out comments.
The Hyatt Regency Vancouver has extended an apology after it was accused of anti-Indigenous racism for denying a man access to the restroom. In a statement, the hotel writes that it, quote, deeply regrets that the BC Association of Aboriginal Friendship Centres cultural advisor felt discriminated against. It also writes that it's taking several steps, including retaining an advisor on Indigenous culture and issues and working with the BCAAFC and other organizations to learn how it can hire Indigenous peoples. Last week, the BCAFC accused hotel staff of denying a cultural advisor access to the washroom 4 times on one night in late February. The hotel's manager says that an investigation concluded the employee in question was following overnight protocols by closing restrooms in unused areas of the hotel and by redirecting the men to an open restroom. Well, nearly 2 weeks after a BC woman was found dead in Mexico, her body is being returned home. Kiara Agnew's family says her final flight will arrive in Edmonton tonight. The 23-year-old's body will then be brought to Dawson Creek. Her return was delayed as Mexican police conducted an autopsy. Agnew was found dead at a resort in Cancun where she had traveled with her boyfriend. Mexican police have said a foreign national was arrested and is being investigated for the possible crime of femicide. Police in Burnaby are investigating following the discovery of a body at a park. Earlier today, Burnaby RCMP found a deceased person at a structure fire. The body was located in the area of Southridge Drive and Byron Park Drive. Arson investigators and other plainclothes units are on the scene and currently leading the investigation. RCMP are releasing no additional details at this time. Well, jailbirds of a feather continue to flock together, it seems, as another pigeon wearing a drug smuggling backpack has been found inside a BC prison. This time the bird was found at the Matsky Penitentiary in Abbotsford. Guards say it was wearing a backpack made of old jeans or possibly bed sheets. This comes 2 months after a similar situation at the Pacific Institution nearby. Officers found the latest bird wearing its luggage during a routine search on the morning of February 27th.
It's just a whole other element. Like, we've been dealing with drones, which has been a huge problem. We've been dealing with throwovers. We've been dealing with smuggling in, and now we have to deal with, I guess, the wildlife aspect as well, which is completely new to us. So it's a new challenge for sure.
Officials believe the pigeon with its empty bag was still in training. The last pigeon mule was found with a sack already full of crystal meth. While birds have been used to smuggle drugs into prisons for decades, the tactic is proving a challenge to investigate. A BC family is speaking out tonight after a terrifying episode when their son was just 5 years old. His prescription medication related to his special needs turned out to be 14 times the recommended dose, and they had to find that out on their own. Bethany Lindsay shows us what they went through and their calls for greater transparency.
Eli Wilson is autistic and doesn't speak.
Yeah, they're so cute.
Yeah, I love that one.
He also has a seizure disorder made worse by sleep deprivation. The drug clonidine helps him sleep through the night.
So I had just picked up a refill.
In February 2021, 5-year-old Eli took his first dose from a new bottle compounded by Goldstream Forbes Pharmacy in Victoria.
And about 20 minutes after he had it, he kind of fell asleep on his feet, which was very out of the ordinary.
The next morning, he slept in.
We felt right away something was wrong. It was more than just a deep sleep, and we tried to rouse him, and we couldn't.
Eli spent the day struggling to stay awake and spent the night in hospital. His parents paid a lab more than $5,000 to test the compound. It contained 14 times the prescribed dose.
I burst into tears.
Yeah.
The College of Pharmacists of BC agreed to investigate. That's how the Wilsons learned the pharmacy had no policies or procedures for compounding drugs, and there would be no punitive measures for the pharmacists, no public notification of what had happened.
It's completely swept under the rug.
Last week, the Health Professions Review Board upheld the college's decision, so the Wilsons decided to speak out.
I think it's important that people are aware, and so they can ask questions of their pharmacist and then make good decisions, for themselves.
The college didn't respond to requests for comment, and a lawyer for the pharmacists said they can't comment because of patient confidentiality. But she said staff training around safe and accurate dispensing of drugs is now in place at all Forbes pharmacies.
Eli is nearly 8 now and fully recovered, but he still needs clonidine.
Every time we do that, we hold our breath a little bit.
With each new bottle, they start with a tiny dose. Bethany Lindsay, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hundreds gathered in Nanaimo today to demand increased public safety after a man was injured in an apparent act of vigilantism.
It's not our job as citizens to tell them how to solve these problems. We're the ones with the problems, and we have votes.
The rally comes after Nanaimo RCMP say the owner of a local mechanic shop was shot in the stomach trying to retrieve stolen property from a homeless encampment. The man was one of 6 people who went into the encampment to recover stolen tools. Today, members of the business community called out on political leaders to make change.
It's a terrible circumstance that brought people out, but it was almost inevitable. You cannot ignore 30, 40 years of failed social policy, health policy, and not expect that we get to this stage where people just get really frustrated. They don't feel safe.
Mounties, meanwhile, say they do not condone the group's actions, saying that risking life or injury over stolen property is, quote, not worth it. Well, former Premier John Horgan and Health Minister Adrian Dix announced a new integrated healthcare centre in Souk.
I think it's a model that doesn't just include the community health center and urgent primary care center, but all the other health services, home care and home support, mental health and substance use services, which are sometimes urgent and sometimes chronic support. Having all of those services together and adding services in one location, it makes a lot of sense.
The centre will open in 2025 and will have a team of family physicians, registered nurses, mental health and substance use workers. The new staff will supplement those already working at West Coast Family Medical Clinic. Despite this, there are concerns over staffing the facility as the province grapples with an ongoing shortage in doctors and nurses. Meanwhile, at the announcement, Horgan revealed his final day as MLA will be March 31st.
I've been reluctant to accept that any kind words. I'm grateful for them, but it's the people. What an honor it's been to serve in a community that is totally committed to helping their neighbors. That's what Souk's all about. And so it was a great place for me to start a public life.
Horgan is the longest-serving NDP premier in BC history. He was first elected in the riding of Juan de Fuca in 2005. Well, after the devastating earthquakes in Turkey and Syria caused a shortage of clean water, local municipalities are now trying to get ahead of the problems earthquakes could cause the water supply in this region, with scientists warning that BC could one day experience its own major quake. Yasmin Rania toured a water storage reservoir to learn more about what's being done.
This looks like an optical illusion.
This is the Pebble Hill Water Storage Reservoir in South Delta, almost 20 feet underground. It's clearly empty now, but when upgrades are completed, it will be filled up with millions of liters of drinking water, supplying water to local residents.
Well, the seismic upgrade at this reservoir consists of strengthening the roof, strengthening the connection between the roof and the walls, and then strengthening the walls themselves.
Important upgrades to boost the resiliency of the water supply ahead of a looming earthquake.
Well, we know the big one will come one day. And so with Metro Vancouver, we've been steadily upgrading our reservoirs since the 90s and our pump stations to prepare for that event, just to ensure that we can provide water to the region following the earthquake.
Turkey experienced a clean water shortage after its devastating earthquakes. Much of the region's sanitation infrastructure damaged, health authorities struggling to keep survivors disease-free. The Pebble Hill Reservoir has 3 cells. 2 are currently out of service getting upgrades, which are performed during the winter when there's lower demand for water. The 3rd cell is in service, providing water to the residents of the Tsawwassen area.
People do often walk by them without even realizing it, and sometimes they're even playing on top of them without realizing it. Often our reservoir rooftops have tennis courts or, in some cases, pickleball courts that the public utilizes.
There are about 26 reservoirs throughout the Lower Mainland, some older than others, and in need of different upgrades and repairs.
Well, each one would have to be assessed individually to determine their remaining lifespan. And that's what we do with every upgrade project, is we see which components need work just to extend the life.
New reservoirs are typically designed for a lifespan of 75 to 100 years. Metro Vancouver has been doing this work for decades and has conducted several studies about the impacts of a major earthquake.
We know that this is a seismically, vulnerable area. Any of our new infrastructure is always built to meet the current codes that are in place. But what we're looking at is the older infrastructure.
Upgrades to the Pebble Hill Reservoir will be completed by the summer, a step closer to preparing for the big one. Yasmin Ghaneya, CBC News, Delta.
Well, Vancouver rainwater infrastructure is getting an upgrade.
Vancouver is a city born of its climate. We're the rain city, after all, Vancouver, some might call it. And really, having grown up here, there's not much better than the fresh smell of Vancouver rain. So what I love about this project and how the Natural Infrastructure Fund works is that we're using that very natural environment to build resilient infrastructure. The Rain City strategy is innovative, it's community-driven, and it's a natural solution to prevent urban flooding.
More than $36.2 million has been allocated towards Vancouver's Rain City strategy, with the federal government covering half the costs. The city says the upgrades will enhance the use of natural infrastructure to prevent urban flooding and improve water quality, with the goal to capture and clean 90% of Vancouver's average annual rainfall. Well, Canada is removing the COVID testing requirement for airline passengers from China. It was implemented January 5th in response to surging Chinese case numbers. A negative pre-departure test result was required for anyone arriving from China, Hong Kong, or Macau. Ottawa says the situation has now improved and no new variants of concern have been detected here. The test requirement will be lifted at midnight tonight. It stresses, though, that passengers should still wear masks during flights. Well, 8 skunks were found dead in BC last month, and after testing positive for avian flu likely caught from wild birds. Many of those who interact with birds are being encouraged to take care. As Ithil Musa reports, these outbreaks are affecting animals, zoos, and farms across the country.
Visitors flocking to the Toronto Zoo in hopes of catching a glimpse of exotic birds will have to wait. Several cases of a highly contagious strain of avian flu were confirmed in southern Ontario this week, and the zoo isn't taking any chances.
We took the proactive steps to close our aviaries to our guests to protect the birds that are in our care.
There were major outbreaks last year of the H5N1 virus around the world. In Canada, nearly 5 million domestic birds were infected, and more than 250 farms and facilities experienced outbreaks, according to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Experts say seasonal avian flu outbreaks will likely continue to happen.
That is associated with migratory birds. So it's primarily being transmitted because of migration of those birds, and that's why there's some seasonality to the behavior of this virus.
Sharif says the risk to humans is low, but this particular strain of avian flu is lethal to birds, and it's proven deadly to other animals too. 8 skunks found dead in British Columbia last month tested positive.
We suspect these skunks became infected by eating dead wild birds.
BC says it's investing $5 million in its poultry and livestock sector to help reduce and prevent disease outbreaks.
As the virus has changed, it is now a year-round challenge that we are facing. These funds will allow us to bring on full-time staff and infrastructure to be able to better respond in the future.
Chicken Farmers of Canada says the impact of avian influenza on poultry farms over the last year has been significant. So farmers are working closely with federal and provincial bodies to reduce the risk of outbreaks. Ithil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
To breaking news now, the union representing bus drivers in the Eastern Fraser Valley tells CBC a strike will begin Monday. CUPE 561 says drivers will reduce to essential handy-dart service only, barring any last-minute talks, which the union says are not currently expected. CBC has reached out to BC Transit, but has not yet heard back. Minnekhada Regional Park in Metro Vancouver has fully reopened following last fall's wildfire. The fire tore through the area in October, burning through 140,000 square meters of the park in Coquitlam. Unusually hot and dry conditions left the area extremely vulnerable to fire, and investigators later determined the blaze was human-caused. More than $14,000 in donations were raised to support restoration efforts.
We're really excited that it's now fully reopened after the park was restored after the fire last October. All trails are open, except there is some trails, and we're going to have extra staff presence around to make sure that some of the trails aren't quite open in regards to the fact that there's still some damage that we're still cleaning up and repairing.
While the park is reopened, visitors are being advised to stay on designated paths due to potential hazards caused by the wildfire damage, and strict prohibition on smoking will be in place. And we'll now bring in our Radio-Canada colleague Jules Desjarlais with the weather. Jules, another beautiful morning here.
It is beautiful out there, right? The temperatures are still lower than seasonal, but it was a gorgeous day. A little bit cloudy in up north. We still have that low pressure system for the northwest that we can expect some rain and snow for Whitehorse. But besides that, you see the effect of the high pressure system, even through most of Alberta. Luckily, we'll keep that system for 2 or 3 days. If we look at the forecast for tonight, it might be chilly again. Like this morning, it was a bit chilly, close to 0 for the minimum. It's going to be windy, breezy, 10 to 20 kilometers per hour. So for the morning people, it's going to be chilly for tomorrow morning. Cloudy, maybe a little bit more, a few clouds for tonight. If you go to the Okanagan, it's going to be variable, partly cloudy with temperatures below zero, more pronounced for the south of the Rockies. Up north, we have more cloud and some showers for Dease Lake and also for Whitehorse. Wind are more present for Sandspit for tonight, and we still have some good news for the next few days. I'll give you more details in a few seconds.
All right, we will check in with you a little later. Thanks, Jules.
Bye.
A para-snowboarder from Campbell River is celebrating another major victory. Tyler Turner raced to gold in La Molina, Spain, capturing his second world title in as many years in double-leg amputee snowboard cross. As Karen Larson reports, being a world champion snowboarder is only part of Turner's unique story.
This part is just where I remove my other, my walking feet or my swimming feet or anything that I connect on.
Tyler Turner's new prosthetic snowboard foot came through at the Para World Championships in Spain, where he captured a second straight gold medal in snowboard cross.
Tyler Turner, landing gear down, he grabs the gold.
To go with the Paralympic Games gold he won a year ago in China. The latest victory is another instance of defying the odds because even Turner didn't expect it, having missed most of the season adjusting to new prosthetic legs.
Not knowing how well my legs were going to work after just receiving them a couple weeks ago, right before leaving to Europe. I didn't want to put too much pressure on myself.
Turner lost both legs in a skydiving accident 6 years ago. An avid snowboarder, he returned to the para side of the sport and now dominates his division.
Once I got over to Europe here, it just flipped a switch, and I see red when I start competing.
Being a champion snowboarder is only part of Turner's exciting life. He also competes in parasurfing, loves to skateboard, continues to teach skydiving, and in his spare time has taken up kite suit flying. Rounding out the thirst for adventure, last year he and his girlfriend sailed the boat they live on 4,000 nautical miles from Campbell River to Mexico.
It's like one side of the spectrum to the other because I'm either flying my wingsuit or I'm sitting watching a movie, and it's like I don't do a whole lot of in between. It's nothing in moderation, I like to say.
With such an interesting story, Turner is increasingly in demand as a speaker. Overcoming obstacles is an obvious part of his message, but he tries to steer clear of the easy cliches.
The biggest thing that I like to kind of put out there is that, it looks amazing on Instagram or the internet or whatever, but that's not the real story. And I would say the real story isn't sexy. It's actually, it's just grit, determination, put your head down.
As for his snowboard future, Turner hopes to keep the win streak going through to the 2026 Paralympics in Italy. Karen Larson, CBC News, Vancouver.
With climate change, we're all learning to adapt to a warming planet, even our cold-blooded friends. That's next. Thanks for joining our commercial-free live stream. A new Maritime Pro Basketball League is set to launch next month, but one of the two PEI teams that were supposed to be a part of it has pulled out. As Steve Bruce reports, Summerside won't have a team when the league tips off.
This was the scene back in late 2021 as plans were announced for the new Eastern Canadian Basketball League, including two PEI rivals.
And I can't wait for that first game between Charlottetown Power and Summerside Slam, because I'm telling Basil Stewart right now, we're going to slam Summerside Slam.
But turns out no team will be slamming the Slam when the league launches next month. The owner of the league and its 7 teams was counting on a rental agreement with the city of Summerside to play games out of Credit Union Place. But the city decided in early February not to go ahead with it.
Made the decision to
Deputy CAO JP DeRosier says there just weren't enough details about the league worked out for the city to be confident it would launch on time and be a success.
One thing we're very fortunate for here in our market and our venue is that there's just insane demand for our facilities. So for us to be holding dates for something that, you know, may or may not come to fruition was becoming more and more challenging for our existing users. From an operational perspective, I mean, we still hadn't received, you know, an understanding of where the financing was going to come from, the sponsorships, you know, even player housing. We know we're into a housing struggle in the province, and, you know, so finding housing for athletes was not going to be an easy feat.
Schedules for the 6 remaining teams, including Charlottetown's, were just finalized recently, and some players are still being recruited. Charlottetown's roster is only 2/3 full. The league's vice president says given this is year one, that all makes sense.
A lot of it is first-year blues, right? I mean, you've got so many details to work out for the first season. We also had to wait for other leagues to wrap up to see what players would be available. I'm talking about mostly the European leagues. And again, a lot of it was availability of arenas. That's why the schedule was late being drawn up.
Charlottetown will play its games out of the Eastlink Centre. That rental agreement is just being finalized today. Tickets will go on sale next week.
We feel it's going to be a success. We had the storm here. Successful to a point, yes. But it's another offering for our clientele to come in, the fans of Prince Edward Island to be in the Eastlink Centre. There's no risk in it for us. We don't have anybody else in here at the time.
Officials in Summerside say they will keep an eye on how things go this season here in Charlottetown and around the league. And if all does go well, may look to join next year. Steve Bruce, CBC News, Charlottetown.
The latest episode of the CBC Explore series, Planet Wonder, explores how animals are impacted by climate change. Our Johanna Wagstaff got to meet all kinds of creatures at BC Wildlife Park, even getting up close and personal with a few snakes. One would assume these cold-blooded reptiles are better able to survive a warming planet, but they have their own challenges. Take a look.
Carl, I wanted to ask you and Karina, the rubber boa, what kind of animal behaviors enhance the ability to survive? What qualities does Karina have that would give her the ability to survive during the heat dome?
Like all reptiles and amphibians, she's an ectotherm. What that means is it gives them several big advantages. One is that they can tolerate a really wide range of temperatures. So for you or me, if our body temperature goes up 1 or 2 degrees or down 1 or 2 degrees, we're in trouble, right? It's fever, hypothermia. They have a body that's built for handling a range of temperatures. The other advantage is they don't have to eat as often or drink water because they're not fueling this big engine inside them that's geared to keeping their body temperature at this narrow range. What we found during the big heat dome a couple years ago is most of our snakes that we were following through radio telemetry just went down in a hole and stayed there throughout the whole heat dome. And it probably wasn't the best situation, and they definitely lost weight in that, but they could do that.
You're good? Rolling.
Meet Veronica McKelvey, Carl Larson's master's student. She tracks snake behavior. Veronica, tell me about your rattlesnake research.
Yeah, so I study the overwintering behavior, not just of rattlesnakes actually, also of Great Basin gopher snakes and Western yellow-bellied racers. So I got a little trilogy here, 3 of them, all the snakes. I'm like, give me all of them, yeah. So I look at their overwintering behavior, and what's really interesting about here in Canada is that we have winter. It's a big sort of roadblock for snakes. They have to be able to survive in some way, and they use these really cool features that we have in the landscape called dens. So when I track the snake, I use a receiver and antenna. I turn it on and I put it to the unique frequency of the radio transmitter. When I turn it on, should beep. And I basically hot and cold find it, you know what I mean? Like, oh, it's louder this way. Sometimes it takes a long time, but it should get me to the exact location of the snake. So for the dens, they're gonna be inside, especially in the wintertime. But what's really cool is that these dens provide structural, thermal, and humidity conditions for the snakes to survive over winter. So we learned earlier they're ectotherms, right? So in order to survive, they have to have that nice air temperature that is in their range of survival. If they're out here in the winter, it's probably like, once we hit those negative 20s, I'm sorry, the snake is done for, yeah, exactly. So they have these nice dens tucked away. And what I'm really interested in is this communal feature that some snakes exhibit. So they'll come to these dens, but congregate. And it's really interesting because we usually associate snakes as being solitary, kind of alone. And so there's a few different theories about why communal denning occurs. And the one I'm most interested in is this idea that there is not enough dens, and especially here in these northern latitudes where we see communal denning increasingly.
So interesting. And with climate change and the sort of rise in elevation, this really ties in.
Right, yeah. Well, we could expect changes as a result to this because we see snakes more down south not communally denning. And so this behavior is really unique up in higher latitudes. So it could be shifting as a result of climate change as well.
Two officers killed in the line of duty. After the break, we take you to Edmonton, a city in mourning. Stay with us.
Today is escort training for the Vancouver Police Motorcycle Drill Team.
The most dangerous things going into the intersections, particularly the really busy intersections, and it's the job of the bike that goes into the intersection to make sure that everybody's completely stopped. See pedestrians wanting to walk across. There were jaywalkers back there. People just don't pay any attention to it. They just do whatever they want to. And the thing is when these bikes are going by like this, a pedestrian coming out from between the cars jaywalking is a really dangerous thing, because most of the time you're relying on the motorcycle that's taken the intersection to make sure that everybody's stopped there.
Well, you almost got caught up in that. Yeah. I don't know. Whenever I see police coming at me for any reason, I just automatically assume that they're coming for me.
You can never anticipate what's going to happen next. At First and Clark here that we're coming up on, there's a stalled car up there. So it adds just an extra little dimension. There'll be cars backed up and you've got to get them cleared out of the way so the motorcade can make it straight through.
Hey guys, you're looking good there.
Is there any extra precautions taken for the kind of visitors like the President of the United States and Russia?
The different visitors have different levels of security and would have probably more cars in their motorcade with more security people in it.
See, it's the first time I've ever gone through red lights and not gotten to take it. I never get away with it.
Broadway and Prince Edward locked.
Two Edmonton police officers have been killed in the line of duty, shot while responding to a call in a residential neighborhood. As Julia Wong reports, their deaths have shocked their colleagues and the community where it happened.
A city in mourning after the shooting deaths of two police officers.
These people were doing their job. This is unthinkable. It's unimaginable. It's horrific. It's a tragedy.
The officers are 30-year-old Constable Brett Ryan, who was with the force for 5 years, and 35-year-old Constable Travis Jordan, who was with the force for 8 years. He grew up in Nova Scotia. Officers there paid tribute to him today.
We certainly can relate. We certainly feel for the young officers who passed today, and the grief that their families are feeling at this time.
Just after midnight, they were called to this apartment complex in the northwest part of the city for a family dispute. A male suspect, who sources say was 16 years old, shot them as they approached, then turned the gun on himself.
At this time, all indications are they did not have a chance to discharge their firearms.
A woman was taken to hospital with life-threatening injuries. Sources tell CBC News she is the teen's mother and was also shot. Neighbors and community members are shaken.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. I just almost speechless on something like that for something this close around here.
Now we're beginning to wonder if we really should actually start thinking of moving.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau offered his condolences. Every day, police officers put themselves in harm's way to keep people safe. The two officers' deaths reminds us of that reality. That reality being marked by many now.
Today is a very difficult and sad day. I want you to know that I, my office, City Council, and City Administration are here to support you. We hold you in our hearts as you mourned this profound loss, and we mourn it with you.
CBC's Julia Wong reporting in Edmonton tonight. An internal review has found that Canada's human rights watchdog discriminated against its own employees. David Thurton speaks to some of those employees exclusively about the racism they experienced.
I had never had the privilege.
Bernadette Becci wants the public to know about the hurt she and other Black civil servants endured.
Sadness, anger, exhaustion. Having to prove that Black bodies are worthy of human is exhausting.
Becci worked at the Canadian Human Rights Commission, the arm's-length federal body that's supposed to investigate discrimination.
I would describe the Canadian Human Rights Commission, the environment, the workplace, as toxic, poisonous. It has affected my mental and physical well-being and health, and I'm not the only one.
Betsy and 8 others filed a complaint alleging discriminatory practices, including that race-based complaints were often dismissed by all white investigative teams, that when she and her colleagues spoke up, colleagues demeaned them, and that black employees were excluded in career advancement. The federal government's human resource arm agreed the commission did discriminate against its own workers.
If the commission itself is guilty of discriminatory practices, really what chance do Canadians have to rely on the commission to protect them from discriminatory practices?
I don't recommend anyone that is black, racialized, or again, from any religious minority group to file a complaint at the Canadian Human Rights Commission.
That's why Betsy wants a third-party investigation by someone experienced in anti-black racism.
They need to come and investigate anti-black racism within the commission.
In a statement, the commission says it accepts the findings. It says it's committed to anti-racism, but won't comment further because the matter is before mediation. Justice Minister David Lametti says the findings are disappointing and concerning. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Russian forces are facing accusations of war crimes in Ukraine. Coming up, we take you through the allegations.
I have many passions. I'm a passionate social advocate, and I work as a diversity consultant with the Department of Education and Lifelong Learning, and I volunteer in many roles and on many boards. My name is Debbie Langston. I am a wife and a mother. I am a black change maker. The work I do impacts children, and for children to do well and to thrive, they need to be able to see themselves in the world around them, and they need to be able to feel that sense of belonging. My work really has only happened in the last couple of years. I would say I've grown into the role that I have. When I think back to the experience that my children had going through the education system and the challenges that they faced, my motivation comes from not ever wanting other children to experience that, and so I work consistently and passionately to ensure that that doesn't happen. When we moved to PEI about 18 years ago, it wasn't as diverse as it is now, and so it was very challenging. When we feel safe and we feel that we belong, it helps us to feel part of a broader community and that we can give to and receive from that community. I think PEI has a very strong sense of community, and historically it's well known throughout Canada for that. I think when you come in as a newcomer or somebody who's either immigrated or moved from other parts of Canada, that's not necessarily as strong, and so it's important that we expand what we think is community so that everybody can feel that sense of belonging. Change begins with you, and so understanding who you are and how you experience the world is not necessarily how everybody else experiences the world. So start there and then move outwards and look around you and see how you can make a better community, what needs to happen, and then work with like-minded people to help bring about change.
The United Kingdom has banned the use of TikTok on government devices. This decision is being described as a precautionary measure. It's part of a wider set of changes that includes only allowing access to an approved list of third-party apps. The new rule comes into effect immediately, coming on the heels of similar bans in Canada, the US, and the EU. The UN investigators today accused Russian forces in Ukraine of war crimes. It came in the UN inquiry report, and the allegations are chilling. As Lindsay Duncombe reports, investigators say some findings may amount to crimes against humanity.
A tragic anniversary marked with candles. 1 year ago, this Mariupol theater was used by civilians as a shelter, clearly marked with the Russian word for children. Russia bombed it, killing as many as 600 people. A war crime, UN investigators say, one of a long list revealed in a report today.
Willful killings, torture, inhuman treatment, unlawful confinement, rape, as well as unlawful transfer and deportation.
The report is based on satellite images, hundreds of interviews, and visits to burial and detention sites. Investigators have compiled a list of Russians they believe responsible, but it's not public.
The suffering that this creates is absolutely immense, and the violations are of such magnitude, of such systematicity, that they certainly deserve accountability.
The UN conclusions come as reports this week suggest the International Criminal Court will open 2 cases against Russians, one for targeting infrastructure and one for abducting children.
This is the biggest test of the international justice system, really, since Nuremberg.
This veteran war crimes prosecutor says the challenge will be holding leadership accountable.
Not just the foot soldiers who we've seen on trial so far. Will we be able to go up the chain of command? Will we be able to show that military commanders, that political leaders ordered crimes?
UN investigators stopped short of calling the atrocities committed in Ukraine genocide, but said they would continue to gather evidence in that area. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, London.
Reports say Washington is hoping an international force can be deployed to quell the political chaos in Haiti, and that Canada can lead it. As Evan Dyer tells us, gangs are now estimated to control more than half of Haiti's capital, with the situation worsening rapidly.
This month began with a sudden advance of the gangs that have terrorized the Haitian capital for the last few years.
It's unbearable. You're thinking it can be that worse. And the next day, you find out it's getting worse.
Marco Ladosiliere is trapped in Port-au-Prince, unable to reach his agri-food business in Haiti's south.
Many schools are now being closed because they are receiving threats from gangs, telling the schools that if you have to operate, you have to pay a ransom. Some days, they even kidnap 30 people. And it happens that they kidnap school bus. Imagine, school bus with little kids, little angels, being kidnapped. And you know what? I'm sure Trudeau knows that.
The Trudeau government is under pressure from Joe Biden to intervene directly in Haiti, which Trudeau has resisted. It was a major topic last time they met in January.
We're all very aware that things could get worse in Haiti, and that's why Canada and partners, including the United States, are preparing various scenarios if it does start to get worse.
Now that things have suddenly gotten worse, Trudeau is still resisting sending Canadian troops or police.
Outside intervention, as we've done in the past, hasn't worked to create long-term stability for Haiti.
I agree with the Prime Minister.
Haiti's most prominent opposition leader says it's true foreign missions haven't brought lasting peace and probably wouldn't bring it now. But he admits most Haitians just want someone to stop the gangs.
I understand those people. They're asking for any solution that can help them right away to make sure that the gangs can no longer kidnap them, can no longer rape their children.
In Canada, there's little sign the public wants a costly intervention in Haiti. Next week, President Biden will be here, and he's expected to put more pressure on the Trudeau government to fix a situation that no one else has been able to deal with. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Ottawa.
And time to bring back Jules Desjardins with a look at the forecast. Jules, we were so spoiled all week with sunshine. Can we expect this to continue into the weekend and maybe even into next week?
Yeah, partly for the weekend, especially for tomorrow, though. We're going to keep the high pressure with us. And this morning, it was gorgeous. This is the picture I took while walking with a coffee in my hand. And you can see the snow on the mountain. So we still have some beautiful snow for those who want to continue with spring break until Sunday. But the temperatures were close to average today, 11 to 12 degrees for the southwest. So that was this morning, and probably we're going to repeat that for tomorrow. The low pressure system is still active up north, but it's fading away slowly in the next few hours. We'll still have the impact of the high pressure system on most of the province. But you can see at the end of the day, tomorrow night, we'll have a few clouds on the coast, especially on Vancouver Island. Nothing dangerous, but it's still going to be cloudy for 24 hours for that region. A couple of millimeters for the north, a few millimeters actually. And the temperatures are going to be higher for tomorrow, a little bit warmer for Vancouver. Finally, 12 to 13 degrees, a bit warmer for the interior. More cloudy in the morning for the island. Very beautiful day for the Okanagan Valley. Rising temperatures also for the south of the Rockies for tomorrow. We have a little bit of sun for the northwest and for the interior also for the next few days. I was telling you that partly we have more clouds at the end of the day for Saturday, a few showers for Sunday and also for Monday, but the temperatures are going to keep on the nice side of 10 degrees, at least until Monday.
Okay, so you're very inspiring with your photography, and sounds like this weekend is going to be a good time to get out there and take some photos. So thank you so much, Jules.
Bye.
Comfort in community, how some men are tackling depression through peer support. That's next.
There have been more than 25 fires in southeastern New Brunswick since 2019. More than half of those were deemed deliberately set, and the RCMP has described many as suspicious. CBC has been studying these fires, reviewing records and reports of the investigations, to try to take you inside 3 difficult years that left many in the community on edge and wondering if their businesses would be next.
It was always there in the back of my mind, but I never thought it would happen.
This trend of fires was particularly pronounced in August 2021, when in a span of 3 weeks there was no less than 5 fires, 3 of which were at fish processing plants. Bel Air Restaurant in Cap LA had 3 fires. The last one destroyed the building while it was rebuilding from the fire before it. The RCMP has said it's suspicious. Now it's an empty lot. Another restaurant, Chez Camille, burned last April after being open for more than 50 years.
The windows were all out of the building, the whole roof was on fire, the whole dairy bar was completely gone. A lot of people were devastated. You'd come here quite often, check in when it was burnt down. There was a lot of, I'll say elderly people, older people that were sitting in their cars just crying.
The fire marshal's report from the Chez Camille fire describes how a staff member found the siding of the restaurant melted a couple days before the fire, and a plastic jug that smelled like gasoline on the ground. The report describes how Power's cameras captured someone pouring what looked like gasoline on the side of the restaurant when the fire broke out. A month later, Powers doesn't believe anyone has been charged. Staff were sent to fire after fire, prompting the fire marshal to start sending 2 investigators to every call. The Office of the Fire Marshal found a higher proportion of incendiary fires in the region than the provincial average. After Chez Camille burned down last April, alarms seemed to grow. This prompted a meeting in the community led by local politicians. They discussed increased business security and tearing down buildings that were targeted by fire.
It'll have a different feel to it, but it'll still be Shakeabill, and people will know it's still us.
Almost a year later, Brad Powers and Che Camille are rebuilding. His new restaurant will be bigger with more seating. It will have a familiar sign, one of the only things salvaged from the fire last year. As he prepares to open later this year, Powers worries his business could be targeted again. RCMP say they continue to investigate the fires, but would not comment on any possible links between them. One person has been charged in relation to one fire, and they have pleaded not guilty. They will be back in court in April.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On March 30th, join Angela Starrett at the Alumni UBC webinar on Indigenous youth, nurturing the next generation. Hear from 3 Indigenous speakers who mentor Indigenous youth to share knowledge in their communities and beyond. Register at alumni.ubc.ca and never miss an episode of your favorite CBC drama or comedy with the free CBC Gem app. Check it out at gem.cbc.ca.
Talking about our mental health struggles isn't always easy. Stigma can often keep people from seeking help. In New Westminster, a group of men have been meeting weekly for a peer support group. Radio-Canada video journalist Simon Gauthier visited to see firsthand the positive impact of asking for help has had on their lives.
Dans ma vie, j'étais très négatif. Très négatif, j'avais aucun objectif dans la vie. Je vivais au jour le jour et j'étais très renfermé. Et je me suis dit qu'il fallait que je change. Il fallait que quelque chose change en moi. Donc la raison pour laquelle j'ai décidé d'essayer un groupe d'hommes plutôt que d'aller chercher de l'aide professionnelle, je pense qu'il y avait plusieurs aspects. Donc il y a l'argent, premièrement. Il y avait aussi cette idée qu'un professionnel qui m'aidait voulait dire que moi j'avais un problème.
People are becoming more aware of depression and how debilitating it can be. And what we're seeing is social stigma is decreasing. Unfortunately, self-stigma tends to be rather stubborn. So while we can be compassionate, empathic toward another person who's struggling, we don't seem to share that with ourselves if we're struggling.
I worked in this field, which is so ironic that I worked in the mental health field, and yet I let these things happen to me. I knew all the signals, I knew all the signs, and yet I ignored every single one until it was too late. And I think for me that was even a little harder because I'm supposed to be, somewhat of an expert or a professional in this regard, and I failed. Sorry. So it hit hard and it hit deep. And I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel.
Having a certain aspect of self-reliance is actually a healthy thing for all of us, yet taken to the extreme where we deny ourselves the possibility of engaging with help if and when we need it, we actually expose ourselves to greater risk of harm in the long run. There was a study done in Australia, and in fact what they found that self-reliance taken to an extreme was actually the strongest predictor of suicidality amongst men.
Si on ne m'avait pas poussé à prendre le premier pas et à contacter ce groupe d'hommes, je ne pense pas avoir pris le premier pas par moi-même, non. Non, j'étais bien dans mon malaise, dans ma dépression, dans ma vie. Du moins, je pensais que je l'étais à l'époque. Parce que j'avais un poids que je portais sur moi, ça fait des années, je ne savais pas c'était quoi. Mais juste le fait de pouvoir m'ouvrir, de pouvoir partager, de laisser sortir cette énergie. Et donc, je trouve vraiment que maintenant, je peux dire que je suis sur mon chemin personnel, mon chemin professionnel. Je me sens complètement à l'aise avec ce que je fais, complètement heureux avec qui je suis, et ce que j'entreprends. Donc si j'avais un message à m'envoyer à moi-même dans mon passé, il y a 4 ans, ce serait que la vie est belle et de faire tout ce que je peux pour voir cette beauté dans la vie. Et que c'est que moi. L'obstacle principal, c'est moi. Il n'y a personne d'autre dans mon chemin. C'est moi-même, c'est les obstacles émotionnels que je me mets moi-même qui m'empêchent de voir cette beauté.
Right, so did I fail? No. So this is part of what you learn, is I didn't fail. I reached out, I did the right things, I got the help I needed. Quit being so freaking hard on yourself, man, and love yourself. You should tell yourself you love yourself at least once a day, if you can, because you should. You absolutely should.
And that is our show for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us on CBC Vancouver News at 6. For news anytime, you can visit cbc.ca/BC. We also want to remind you, if you're not already watching us on CBC Gem, that is our free app, where you can find this show and many others. Janella Hamilton will be right here at 11 with your local late news. Good night.